Today's episode is brought to you by HERdacity. HERdacity is a nonprofit inspiring confidence in women to achieve their professional goals. For resources, networking opportunities, and a strong community of women, visit HERdacity.org to learn more.
Welcome to HERdacious, a podcast for audacious women. Greetings to you all. This is Lorelei, the audacious host of HERdacious, recording out of Moonlab Studios in Austin, Texas. Joining me on the show today, we have the first Latina in Williamson County to be elected to the Texas Legislature, the first Latina school board president for Round Rock ISD, and avid marathon runner, Diana Maldonado.
Thank you, Lorelei, for having me here. Thank you.
So, avid marathon runner, huh?
Yes.
Ugh.
That's what I said at the beginning.
What?
That's what I said at the beginning, but now, caught the bug and I love doing it, and I do it as part of destination races and looking at new frontiers and horizons that I can discover.
I love that. What's your next destination?
Berlin.
Holy moly. All right. Well, get it, girl. So we have Diana on today to talk about the challenges that women of color face climbing the ladder. So you have been around Texas for a hot minute, and you've done a lot of amazing firsts, and you are clearly crushing it. Talk to me about some of the challenges that you and your peers and your other female colleagues might be experiencing as women of color trying to get up the corporate ladder or the political ladder or the professional ladder in general.
Yes, of course. So early on, and I feel that to some degree was a pioneer in this path because I started my political career 10, 11 years ago. I was in leadership positions, at that time, if not even longer. So it was a solo journey of discovery. But however, it was how to connect with people, with organizations, books, or what have you. So finding whatever was out there. So it was that thirst of the connection. The wonderful thing that's happening now, Lorelei, is that the motions and the movements that are now occurring make it so much wonderful for women to make those connections more quicker and have this groundswell and have more of a collaborative partnership among women and among organizations to be able to identify potential obstacles, or maybe just little minor detours. So I like the fact that right now the time is so wonderful for women of color that are wanting to succeed, climb the corporate ladder, or whatever ladder it is for their success, that they have the ability to make those connections. And it's a lot more fluid right now.
Okay. So optimism, I'm hearing optimism from you. Let's get back to some of the challenges, both community level, corporate sector level, culture-wise, in the general woman of color experience, where they can typically hit some sort of hurdle or roadblock to their success.
My experience, obviously, being Latina, growing up in a border town, there's a lot of traditional values, a lot of traditional practices, what have you, that you want to stay inside your box and not cause any waves and don't bring any attention to yourself. And I think it goes for lots of other cultures as well. And as you're wanting to be more mainstream, like, how do you make that connection? So growing up, there was a lot of limiting parameters for me. However, growing up, I also knew that our parents also wanted us to excel, but it was up to us to figure out that opening and how to figure out and get out of that box. And again, with having grown up in a border town, small town, a wonderful, wonderful experience, a wonderful childhood. However, I knew that I just wasn't going to live there because it was very limiting to education opportunities. It was very limiting to career opportunities. And I knew that I had to move out of that environment in order for me to excel. So fast forward, I ended up in Austin. And growing up, I didn't have the relationships or the mentorship. And when I get to Austin, I realized that the opportunities were there, but I didn't have any relatable relationships.
What does that mean?
To me, it's like if I wanted to be in a leadership position or if I wanted to run for office, like I didn't see anybody like me. If I wanted to be in the corporate sector, I didn't have anybody that was relatable to me. So I felt it took me longer because I didn't see anybody relatable to me and I didn't know who to ask because you are vulnerable and you are forging a new path for yourself and hopefully for others. And you're also careful not to make too many mistakes. But now looking back, there is a beauty in making mistakes because you do learn. And then you're able to, as you encounter something like it or similar to it, you're able to make that course correction quicker. So knowing that there was some opportunities, and then that's why I looked around and wanted to see how to fill those voids or make the connections.
I love that you mentioned the need for relatable mentors, relatable figures to look up to. And I think we are learning more and more as a society and a culture that people have to see those who look like themselves, at least somewhat, to know that they can go do that too. That goes all the way from the top to the bottom, whether it's seeing a president be female in Europe or whatnot, or you see marketing materials. These are the types of people that do this business, or these are the types of people that use this service. And if you don't see a representation of yourself, you don't think that you're welcome there. You don't think that you're allowed to be there. You don't feel like you can move into that space comfortably. There are not a lot of people who are trained how to embrace vulnerability and be comfortable moving into a space where they don't feel welcome.
Correct. And that's why I say that I had a vision, or I knew what I wanted to do, but it was that journey of self-discovery, making sure that I found those mentors or mentor-like opportunities and situations. So in most of my career, I've worked in a male-dominated industry. So I looked for allies with regards to men who were successful, and then also men who were inclusive. And I also looked for women who were in leadership positions now in their work ethic. Just really was drawn to tapping into their mentorship or their advice and asking them, can I ask you a question? Can I follow your best practices? So slowly but surely, I didn't realize what I was doing is building a network base. 30 plus years, I still remember the very, very first friend at the comptroller's office, and we're still very dear friends.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
And yeah, she took me, basically, she's like, come over here. And I think that she saw that I was scared or a little fearful. When she just tapped me by the shoulder, that made all the difference.
I'm really glad you had that opportunity. So, Diana, when you're talking about moving into these spaces where vulnerability exists for the person who might not have the mentor or the person to emulate that might look like them, how can diversity and inclusion create opportunities for people, for businesses, for cultures?
I think now that businesses are being more intentional about defining what diversity is and what the inclusive components to how they define diversity in an organization as a culture, and not only paying lip service to it, but really being more intentional of what it means to an employee. What does it mean to the people that we serve? I think it's an opportunity for inclusivity in as far as they're transitioning, they're evolving. There's a motion moving forward because, again, when growing up, I was in the box and there was stagnation. And so I come here, to Austin and start building my career, and I found the same box again. So I realized that it's getting out of the box and having a voice, and also being in those organizations for people to have different perspectives, start thinking differently. And with that thinking and that thought process, it helps to expand for companies, for organizations to get out of that complacency, the stagnation, and really, really open up to creativity and innovation for them.
So you have been kind of a pioneer in Central Texas in a few different roles. Give us some examples of your personal professional experience trying to break out of that box, maybe in general as a Latina in Texas. I know you've also lived you mentioned California to me privately, and you've lived outside of the United States of America. In Mexico.
Yes, in Mexico, in Saltillo.
What are some examples of you overcoming some of those limits on your success?
Obviously being born in Texas, and there was a short time we did live in Oklahoma.
Oh my gosh.
and I would say I lived in Guyman, Oklahoma, Texas. I mean, that's how proud I was of Texas. I was the only two Hispanics in my first grade class. And so it seemed different, and obviously it was. But what happened was that it wasn't a thriving community, and my father recognized that. So what happens is then he moves us down to the border town in Eagle Pass. And we moved to Eagle Pass. And so obviously we were already fluent in English. We didn't have the border accent and, all that richness that comes from living on the border. And so then we it was kind of like almost like reverse discrimination where the Latinos, the Hispanics were like, spoke English. We did well in school and what have you. So it was the Latinos there in our community were like taunting us. And
You were othered.
I was othered. But one thing is that I told my sister, oh, I don't think Dad's going to move us away from here, because we were close to family and relatives. And so it was about tearing away those fears and doubts from our new friends in our community and finding ways to work together or for them to get to know us and that we were going to be part of the community. So that was at a very early age that I had to do problem solving and do a collaborative outreach and build a network and friendships that to this day, I have my second and third grade friends that I still stay in contact with.
I love that you still have relationships from second and third grade built out of your need to create solutions for yourself.
Right. And it was just like a fear factor. And when it's fear and it's because you don't know. But when somebody comes to the table and says, this is what it is, or this is who I am, then again, you become vulnerable, but then you're also empowering somebody else to come forward as well.
So did you experience any specific challenges being the first Latina in the Texas House?
Yes, and both on the school board and in the Texas House, because the district that I represented, it was mainly white male and Republican, and of course I'm a Latina and Democrat and female. So, polar opposites. I'm basically coming into their town and it's like, who is she? And because I had the resume, and the resume was factual. And so there was a lot of testing. Like people would just really, really like to throw situations at me or try to kind of get me off message, and just kept testing it. In fact, one time I was in a debate and the other candidate had gum and chewing gum. And I felt as a Latina that, you always have to work harder. As a person of color, you always have to work harder. You want to have your appearance well, and you want to be prepared and prepared again so that you can do well, just to be level field. And sometimes it doesn't even matter, because here was a candidate that obviously did not come prepared as a candidate, was, literally smacking gum during the debate. And it really made me think the unfairness, but what I thought is like, that's okay, because I will win.
And you did.
And I did.
Loved it. All right, so now you're in finance. Have you experienced any sort of challenges to rising through the ranks in your career? Because finance is a still predominantly male sector. And as we've already figured out, you are not a male. So how's that going for you?
It's going really well. Post-politics, I had no idea what I was going to do next. However, I did know that I wanted to be in an organization that was innovative, that was forward-thinking, that I was still bringing something meaningful and of value to people's lives, and using my experience and skill sets to that new role, which I had no idea what it was. And the opportunity came to be in the financial industry. So the one thing in this industry is that there's 16% of women in the industry. So the industry in of itself recognizes that they have to recruit and bring more women to their firms. And then there's probably around 3% people of color in the industry. So rather than look at it like, oh my God, we have a dilemma, I'm looking at it as an opportunity to reach more people.
You are such an optimistic person. This is amazing. So Diana, what sort of cultural barriers, what sort of in-home values or societal norms, or maybe even religious norms did you have to learn about? Obviously, we have to learn about them, but then you had to figure out where you fit inside of that, or, as you mentioned, break outside the box.
Yeah, so very traditional. Girls did this, boys did that.
What did the girls do?
Oh, the girls, stay quiet. Don't raise your hand in the classroom. Even though we knew the answer, I knew the answer. And, they would always pick on the boys. And as far as being in social settings, okay, the boys get to stay out later. And the girls, you have to come in and prepare housework or help prepare dinner. And so I felt like, no, like, I don't want to do that. And I think it was more in school that I saw those cultural norms that were so just ingrained. And I remember one time I was doing a writing report of what do you want to do when you grow up? So, and it was third grade. And I said, I want to be a doctor. So I wrote my report and the teacher read it. And she comes up to me and says, Diana,
Don't say it. Don't say it.
because you want to be a nurse. You don't want to be a doctor.
Stop it. No.
And I was so proud of my paper. And I looked at her and I goes, why? And she goes, well, because girls are nurses and boys are doctors. And so, yes, so I was in third grade, but I think that was the first moment of breaking outside of the box. And very respectfully, because as a Latina, you don't want to question authority. And I remember telling the teacher, no, this is my dream and I want to be a doctor and I'm not going to change the paper. And so we went back and forth, but I didn't change my paper. I kept it as such. And she wrote a sub note because then it was posted on a bulletin board in the hallway. People would come and read, but she put a little post note saying, even after trying to convince Diana that she should be a nurse, I credit her for sticking to her guns and that she wanted to be a doctor. So kudos to the teacher too, because maybe that was also a learning moment for her as well.
Of course, stepping out of the box that she was trained to be inside of. Love it. Well, because we love our sponsors, we're going to take a brief moment for the sponsor break.
Hi, Barbie here from Moonray, husband and wife indie pop duo. If you enjoy the intro music, we invite you to listen to our debut EP, Honeymoon, streaming now on all platforms. Visit www.moonray-music.com for more.
All right. So, Diana, let's transition away from the challenges and towards the solutions for working women of color to climb the ladder. So how can we start that process? How can we start getting out of our own way or getting other people out of our way? Where do we start in that?
I think it starts with yourself. And I know for me, I had self-limiting beliefs. And again, culturally, the environment where I grew up, what have you. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. It's just what it was. And so it starts to form these self-limiting thoughts and that you can't move forward. But then even in society, I mean, there's some biases and stereotypes. Like if a woman does this, there's no way they can do it. So there's, those obstacles that you also have to get past in society, in addition to us, yourself, imposing those limiting beliefs. It's identifying those. Write them down or talk them over with a friend that you feel that you can trust and you're vulnerable with. Because I definitely think, as Brene Brown says, there's courage and vulnerability. And when I read her book, obviously recently, it's like, man, I wish I would have read that like 10, 20 years ago. That would have been such a game changer. But
I wish it was around 10, 20 years ago. It would have been a game changer.
Yes. But you know what? It's better that we have it now than not at all.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. So when I started realizing that, and like I said, I felt that I was on this solo journey of discovery. And that's why, to some degree, it took longer. But I think you create your own journey. So there's a beauty in it. And so removing, like, why is it that I want to do this? Or I can't blame somebody. I can't make an excuse because you get tired of doing that. And then I say, but I have this and this and that. So that's when I started saying, then start voicing it. Start asking for help. Start saying and sharing with somebody. That's going to make the difference. Start saying what you want. Start asking for what you want. And then it will happen, because if you don't ask or say it or voice it, then it may not happen. And you're just going to watch somebody else have it.
So in going through your professional development, how did you learn to ask for a mentor? Because you've mentioned that before, like mentorship being very important. How did you learn to ask for that?
Interestingly, I did not have a mentor.
Whoa.
And then that's why I advocate now for finding a mentor. And I think mainly it was my limited belief that I felt that I'm not worthy or I'm not going to bring anything to the table. What am I going to say? Or, I mean, that person's not interested in mentoring me. Like they probably think I'm wasting their time. So that's why I think about those limiting beliefs. And so now the opportunity, the environment, the culture in society is just so much more fluid and adaptable that there's so many people and so many women wanting to help. I can pay it forward by helping a younger professional, then I'd be happy to sit down and talk on the phone or what have you. Just ask those 2-3 questions that can change a person's trajectory. So that's why I really advocate for mentorship. And you can have 2 or 3, and just depending on the different aspects or phases that you are in your life. I mean, you can have a health mentor, you can have a career mentor, you can have a relationship mentor. And I think that one person doesn't fill all the needs. I think it's, reaching out so you can grow from those different voices.
If you didn't have a mentor, even while advocating for having mentors, how did you professionally develop yourself without having someone to emulate, someone to guide you, someone to help answer some of those critical questions? How did you grow by yourself, essentially? It sounds like you were very much kind of solo for a lot of your personal and professional discovery.
I was solo in the sense that back then I was quiet and I was just like a sponge. I was like sponging information. I was sponging by emulating somebody. I was like taking in, like I think I was in that time frame. I felt like I was rewiring my being and mentally, physically, the vision. I really, really felt I was doing that. And once I felt I was rewiring myself, it's like, okay, this is as much as you can go. Now's the time to go talk to somebody. Now's the time to connect with these powerful Latinas that are here in Austin. And, the different businesses or areas that I was in and around. I mean, I would go up to them and introduce myself, shake hands, because it was the fear of being known and having that voice. But once, like I said, I came out of that rewiring process by, to me, ingesting the wonderful aspects of other people's successes, I felt then I'm empowered. And that was the first part of reaching out and getting and introducing myself. And maybe it's a different type of mentoring because it was the relationships that were mentors to me. And it's also the books that I read. And even just last year, I put myself on a quest to read because I love reading. Like I said, my father bought us Encyclopedia, World Book and Britannica. So we were always reading. And I felt that was also missing during a phase of my career development. And just recently, I put myself on a goal because I'd missed reading so much that I'm going to read a book a month. And I broke it down. I'm going to read 30 pages a sitting, in 1 week. I can read 90 to 100 pages. Well, I forgot the joy of reading. It was just so wonderful. So instead of reading 12 books a year, I ended up with 23.
Yay!
Yeah. So, and now I'm continuing that because I think I look at life as never stop learning because there's always something to learn and there's always something to give back and pay forward to other people who will ask for help.
Sounds like I was wrong. You were not alone. You just chose to do a few things solo. So talk to me about the support system that you must have created to propel yourself forward, even after unique life situations and challenging circumstances in your home, in your community, at work. What type of support system and network would you advocate for other women of color to develop for themselves to get them through some of these struggles?
I think as you're growing, you always have your friends, and I have some wonderful, dear, friends who are Latinas. And in fact, one of them is one of the first friends I met when I moved to Austin. And I felt that as I was growing out and up, I always came back to them, to these core friends, because they wanted to see me do more and they knew that I could do more. However, I wanted that stability, that trust factor to say, okay, if I'm going to go do this, can I come back and talk to you about it? And I felt that those dear friends were so instrumental in me growing. I have a wonderful mom. Obviously she knew me and she was seeing me just forge into pathways that she never had herself. In our families, nobody had ever run for office. And she would also say, but look at what you have in front of you and look what's yet to come, because you have it in you. And I didn't have that. And however, what we're doing, or what our parents did for us, they set the foundation for us to go and create. And so again, I go back to the voice of my mom, the voice of my friends, where there's certainty, there's truth, and there's vision in what they would share with me. And I would grab that energy. It was this energy that was entrusted in me, and I had it in me, but they brought out that energy, and I would carry that gift. And I felt that that's the mentoring component that I created and had subconsciously.
How would you advocate for other women of color to develop support systems for themselves?
There's the wonderful thing now that there's lots of wonderful organizations that do, specifically cater to Latinas or African Americans, Asian groups, or whatever, it is that's unique and that's being relatable and that's unique and speaks to them. So I would look at groups like that, because that's what I did. When I was going through my divorce, I just recently gotten divorced, and I didn't have a network of friends. So I joined the Hispanic Women's Network of Texas. That was one of the first organizations that I joined here in Austin. And again, right now I have some of the friends that I just first met there, probably back in the late 80s, no, maybe early 90s. I still consider them some of my closest friends. And we've grown together because you know what happens? Then you start supporting each other. And then through that network, I would say, hey, I'm interested in this position. And what do I need to do to prepare? So through those networks and organizations, you form a cadre of friends, of women that, as you're growing career-wise, you can, share and throw some ideas.
So how do you see yourself as a woman of color paying it forward?
What I see myself is being a conduit for people where, they can come and connect, figure out things, tinker around with what they're doing. And if I can sit down with them, or I can facilitate or connect them with someone to help them solve that problem or get to their goal quicker, but also in a quantitative and quality road, then I like doing that. Because, again, I feel that I went through my journey alone, and no one should have to do that now in today's times. And I think there's more efficiencies, there's more opportunities, there's wonderful organizations, and there's just amazing people all around you. If you take the time to listen and to really see, that you'll find those treasures and gems along the road.
Now, I know that none of y'all can see her face when she's talking about this, but when she was telling me about being a conduit, there was a spark. There was a joy there. Where does that joy come from, Diana?
I think when you see change, at least when I see change, when I do see someone smile, when I see their eyes light up, that they see it and they get it, and they know what that information that I may have connected them with or have shared with them, when I see their face light up, then I light up, because then I know they're going to be okay, or at least I know they're on that right path of discovery. And one of the things now, being older, what I practice is abundance, and in having this energy of abundance.
What does that mean? Energy of abundance.
When I started yoga a few years back, also in the yoga, I'm deepening my faith, and I'm also looking at health-wise, how I can be healthy so that I can think clearer, so that I can connect better with people, so I can have great business conversations, so that I can have collaborative conversations with people, and depending on what the topic or issue is. The abundance in being the best that you can professionally. So it's doing the self-care, doing, healthy outcomes, being cognizant, but don't beat yourself up for it, because at the end of the day, we're all human and we get to reset the button every day. So I think with that part of it, and then being older, I've had different experiences, and like I said, I'm on my 3.0 career. And so I feel that there's also a knowledge component and an experience component from having been in these wonderful career opportunities, that if anybody wants to venture in any of them that I have been in, then I would love to impart some of those experiences. So that's where I feel that this energy of abundance comes from. And I continue to refine it, refine myself. I never want to stop learning. And I know that I want to be the best. So I'm also looking at it spiritually as well as health-wise.
Wow. I love your process. It's really beautiful.
Thank you. And I think it was just through the course of time, this connection of abundance, energy has come at the right time. And I feel, there may be a 4.0.
I love it. I would love to see what Diana Maldonado's 4.0 looks like. That sounds epic. So to close out our episode, I would like to share a Femme fact, once again, to stimulate your lady brains and to increase your knowledge of our collective history as incredible women. And Diana, in honor of your political firsts, I found another political first to share with our listeners. Do you know what year the first African-American woman was elected to the United States Senate? And I have options. It's multiple choice. 1922, 1950, 1978, or 1992?
To the U.S.
The United States Senate.
I want to say in the 70s.
It was in 1992.
Okay, see? Okay.
Isn't that crazy?
Because I knew it wasn't earlier.
This is.
See, I was optimistic. I was going for the 70s.
I love your optimism, and I want you to know how much that has been shining through in all the things that you've been sharing with us. So this groundbreaking African-American female, the first elected to the United States Senate, her name was Carol Elizabeth Moseley Braun, and she was elected to the United States Senate from the state of Illinois, serving one term from 93 to 99. She holds a number of other firsts, much like yourself, including the first African-American U.S. Senator from the Democratic Party, the first woman to defeat an incumbent U.S. Senator in an election, and the first female United States Senator from Illinois. She defeated veteran Democratic politician Alan Dixon for her historic first in the United States Senate, who had served 2 terms prior. That's 12 years in the Senate, y'all, and she beat him. Amazing.
Amazing, yes.
Prior to her historic senatorial race, Carol had been in the Illinois State House of Representatives, serving from 1979 to 1988. Where she famously and successfully sued her own party and the state of Illinois on behalf of African American and Hispanic citizens in regards to racial discrimination in reapportionment. And that's to clarify, apportionment is the division of a state into districts for the purpose of electing representatives. So reapportionment occurs when changes in the population require a redrawing of the boundaries or a redistricting of these electoral districts. And you might have more recently heard or referred to this process as gerrymandering. Now, when she left the state legislature in 88, her colleagues recognized her contributions in a House resolution, dubbing her the conscience of the House. Let's fast forward past her 6-year term as a U.S. Congresswoman, and losing her re-election bid in 98, she was then nominated by President Bill Clinton to serve as the United States ambassador to New Zealand and Samoa, serving through 2001. In 2004, she was a candidate for the Democratic presidential nomination, dropping out right before the Iowa caucus. She has since retired from politics. She now practices law and is a visiting professor of political science at Northwestern University, and is such a boss. And that is all the time we have for today. Diana Maldonado, thank you so very much for gracing us with your presence. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you, Lorelei, and to HERdacity. Much continued success on the wonderful work that you're doing and the outreach that you're doing here in Austin.
Thank you kindly. So if you liked our show, fam, please subscribe and tell a friend. Your recommendations bring us joy. Until next time, get out there and be bold. You'll enjoy it.